If you have your Bibles, go ahead and grab them. We're going to be in the book of Matthew chapter 6. As you're turning there, a couple things I want to remind you of tonight is our fellowship meal where the men will be providing. So ladies, you don't have to do anything. So men are doing all the legwork, all the providing on that. So come back at 6 and be a part of that. The men are taking care of that. So again, ladies, don't cook no desserts, don't fix no sweet tea, don't cook nothing. The men are taking care of it tonight. So come back at 6, and for that we'll be in the back. And then next Sunday is Flannel Sunday. I jumped ahead of you, but wear your flannel shirt next Sunday, and we'll just blend in together and they done gone plaid. So, and then today, when we get at the conclusion of our service, we'll take up our overflow offering. We're going to do that the last Sunday of every month for a little while, and what that is whatever is taken in the plate today goes strictly toward the building across the street, toward getting that thing paid off and getting that knocked down. And then, of course, that's what that's going to go for. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. So be mindful of that today when you come to the offering and you're giving toward the building today, and just say, hey, well, I usually give the first of the month, and I want to do that. That's fine. If you want to do that, just designate that, on your envelope or your check or whatever, and then we'll make sure that it goes toward the building. But the last Sunday of every month, we'll do an overflow offering, and what that is, we're asking you to give above and beyond your normal tithe to go toward the building. All right. So today we're going to finish up our series called New. We're calling it New Giving. So we've got to do the awkward giving and paying tithes sermon. No preacher likes doing it. Just going to be honest with you. I dread it. Been here for over 2 years. I have never done one, but we're going to do it. And we'll probably do it on those Sundays for a couple months as we talk about giving and our overflow offering. But shortly after the death of John D. Rockefeller Jr., somebody came up to his chief financial advisor and they said, hey, Mr. Rockefeller was one of the most richest men in the world. So just kind of curious, how much did he leave? The financial advisor just simply said this. He said, he left everything. Now, the human race, we are stingy people, are we not? Not too many amens on that. It's all right. We'll get you. We'll get somebody for too long. But we're stingy, and we gather up as much as we possibly can. We gather, and we gather, and we gather, and we gather. But when somebody asks us, hey, what all do you have? We answer in either one of two ways. We'll say, one, we'll say nothing, because we don't want people in our business. Or two, we answer this way. We will spill our guts in an effort to make ourselves look good. And that's the way we answer. We either say nothing, or we pour ourselves out on somebody wanting them to know how much we've got. And we've all heard the term pack right? But that's what we are as humans. We want all that we can get our hands on, and we will do whatever it takes to get as much as we can. But just to remind you that just like Rockefeller, we can't take it with us. Everything will be left behind. So Matthew 6, if you're there, say, I got it. We'll look at verses 19 through 21. And this is right in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. So there is context there. And he's talking to these people. And this is what he says. So Matthew 6, starting in 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So repeatedly throughout the Scriptures, God reminds us that everything will be left behind when we die. Nothing can go through to the spiritual realm. There's nothing that you have right now that you can take with you to heaven. And there's nothing that you have right now that you can take with you to hell. Everything that we have will be left behind. Your possessions, all this stuff that we gather and we gather and we gather is not going nowhere when we die. This is what will happen to your stuff. It's going to be put in a box, probably the box in which it came in. That stuff then is going to be put up for a period of time until somebody else gets their hands on your stuff. And then ultimately what's going to happen is your stuff is going to be sold at the yard sale down the road. So you're probably wondering why you got a Monopoly board up there. Why is Monopoly up there on the screen? I know these kids have been driving me nuts this morning about, why is there a Monopoly game up there, Logan? So what is Monopoly? The word monopoly simply means this: to accumulate a lot of something. Now, if you were to have a monopoly on a business, what that means is that you would own all of one type of business. That way nobody could compete with you. So you would have all the same type of business, so then there's no competition except for within-house, whatever you have within yourself. Now, our lives are built around this concept of monopoly. Now, you may not agree, but it is, because this is what happens. The more that we can get our hands on, the less other people have. So the more that I can acquire, the less that you got. So what is the concept of monopoly? Monopoly is a game where everybody gets a set amount of money depending on who the banker is. And if I'm the banker, I'm getting more than you. So what you do is, you know the game, you take turns. You roll the dice, you move your emblem around. And then if you have the money, you purchase thus said property. And if you have that property, it is yours. And then when you accumulate all of that same property, then you begin to put houses or hotels on it. And then when the other player lands on your property, they owe you rent. So ultimately, the game is designed to make you go bankrupt. And if you can make the other players go bankrupt, then you win in the end. Now, I will have to confess that I have lost this game to a 9-year-old. Because when I land on something, I don't want to pass it up. So by the time I get to the second turn, I'm broke. Anybody else do that? Like, I'm always the first one out. I hate this game. Now, I liked it when, back on the old Nintendo, you could play Monopoly on the vintage Nintendo. And the reason I liked it on there, because you could put the settings on easy, and then I would win. But I can't play, I'm not real good at the board game, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Now, something that we need to understand this morning is this, is that God doesn't care that you have money. God doesn't care that you have stuff. But what God does care about is that so many Christians will put their stuff before God. And they elevate this stuff and they knock God down. And what we do is we begin to start worshiping that stuff, or we start worshiping that money. And I'm here to tell you, God will not be second place to anything else in your life. Exodus 20 verse 3 says, you shall have no other gods before me. See, God knows what happens to us when we start accumulating stuff, when we start getting stuff, when we start building this monopoly in our lives. God is no longer a priority. We want to constantly get this stuff, but so many times throughout Scripture we are warned repeatedly that we can't take this stuff with us, and repeatedly we were told, man, this stuff is going back in the box and it will be destroyed by God's wrath one day. 2 Peter 3:10 says this, but the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements, which that is your stuff, the elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything in it will be laid bare. 2/3 of the parables that Jesus taught on dealt specifically with materialism and finances. Now, why did Jesus stress the issue? Because He knows that when we start to gain worldly wealth, that is then where our heart is then pulled away from God. Anytime we start to gain in this world, our heart begins that tug. It's pulled from God. That's why Jesus pushed so hard on this issue, and he pressed on people, because worldly wealth makes us stingy. We want more, and more, and then eventually we want monopoly, because in the end of the day, we want to be the winner. And we want it so bad that we will push God out of our lives in an effort to get it. Then our stuff becomes our God. Look at verse 21 again. He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. David Livingstone was a great missionary in Africa in the 1800s. But when he died, his body was buried in England where he was from, but they removed the heart from his chest, carried the heart to Africa, and buried his heart under a tree in Africa because the natives said this is the place that he loved the most. Now, if your heart was buried in the place that you loved the most during life, where would that be? Where's your heart at? Where's your treasure at? See, Jesus never said that money was the problem. Jesus never said that having stuff was the problem. But He warned us, He said, because where your heart is, that's where your treasure will be. Jesus talked more about materialism than He did any other sin. Why? Why did He do that? Because He knew the human heart was greedy. In Luke 12:15, Jesus said, He said, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist of his possessions. Now, the reason Jesus warns us in this is because how do we evaluate our success? Like, for real, how do we evaluate how successful we are in life? Because this is what we do. We want people to praise us. We want people to pat us on the back and tell us how good of a job we're doing in life. And that's what we think makes us successful. And we allow the world to determine who we are in life and how successful we really are. And when we do that, what does it do to our heart deep down inside? Does it not make us a little bit more greedy when somebody pats us on the back and says, hey man, you're doing a good job? Does it not want us to make more? We want more of that because it strokes our ego. It makes us feel so good about ourselves. Hey, you're doing so good. Here's a pat on the rear end. You're doing wonderful in life. And we want more of that, and we begin to seek that instead of seeking God. Listen, when God blesses you with money, when God blesses you with things, He does that so that you can in turn bless somebody else. When you give to others, God is glorified. When you invest into His kingdom, God is glorified. Now, what is it that makes us greedy? It's not necessarily having the stuff. I don't think it's the stuff that makes us greedy. It's just what we talked about a minute ago. We want the praise of man. And that's what makes us greedy. We want people to recognize us for who we are and how important we are in life. And it's not the stuff, it's what comes with the stuff. We want man to praise us while the whole time we're drifting farther and farther and farther away from the Lord. And that's why Jesus tells us that, man, one day that stuff is going to be gone. Like, it's not going to be here. Look at verse 19 again. He says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Now, we all remember the calling of the disciples. Like, several of them dudes was rich by the world standards. You had several of them that owned their own fishing business. Now, if you owned your own fishing business back in Jesus' day, you had it going on. We know at least one of them was a tax collector, and that dude was rich. But what did they do? They left it all. They left all they had to follow Jesus. Now, at first, that was the craziest thing they could have ever done. Was walk away from the family business. Was walk away from the tax collector's booth in order to follow Jesus. That was crazy. That was stupid. But now, what do we read about? The impact that they made on the world and the great things that they accomplished. Because what did they do? They put their treasure in God, not in their stuff. Now, let me ask you, when the history is written on your life like we have on these dudes, when all is said and done, when you're dead and you're gone and we're all standing over your grave, will you be known as the person who laid it all out for God? Or will you just be another statistic? How will you be remembered? What is your treasure? Where is your heart? Because the things that we have, and we all got nice stuff. Everybody in here got some nice stuff. The things that we have, do we give the glory to that? Or do we give God the glory for allowing us to have that and providing us with that? Do you put your possessions on the same level as God? Listen, it's not the money. It's not the stuff that bothers God. It's loving the money. It's loving the stuff that bothers God. Hebrews 13:5, very famous passage. You know it. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Now, it's very unfortunate, but many Christians, we live our lives by myths such as, well, it takes breaks to get ahead. It takes money to make money. You can never be too honest in life. Oh, you've heard that one, haven't you? As Christians, you are not to live by myths. As believers in Jesus Christ, you are called to live to a higher standard of living, such as being content, trusting God to provide you with the things that you need. Listen, it is God who gave you. It is God who provides for you what you have. There is nothing that you can do on your own. There is no level of success that you can make it to by yourself. Because at the end of the day, who put the breath in your lungs? If you say that you ever did it on your own, and a lot of Christians will say that, I'm a self-made man, or I'm a self-made woman. I'm going to tell you something. That's the wrong attitude to have, and God will give you an attitude adjustment. You remember a dude named King Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar tried glorifying himself one time. He tried building himself up. Nebuchadnezzar stepped out of God's will and he stepped into a trap. And if we give ourselves glory, that's what we're doing. So just listen to just a couple of verses. Daniel 4:30 and 31 says this. Talking about Nebuchadnezzar, it says, as the king was walking on the roof of his royal palace in Babylon, he said, is not this great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? And then it says, the words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed of you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. Now, if you go on to read the rest of the story, you'll read to where he was driven away from his kingdom, and within a matter of moments, he was grazing like cattle, eating grass from the fields, and he had lost his mind. He went from being on top to being on the bottom. How did it happen so quick? Because he took the credit from God, and he gave it to himself. It is our attitude that God honors. And if your attitude is wrong, God will adjust your attitude. Do you remember the parable of the rich farmer? You know the one I'm talking about? The dude that had the real good crop that one year? What did he do? He said, well, I don't have enough room. So instead of just adding on, he tore down all of his barns. He said, I'll build bigger barns. And then I'm just going to live life. I'm going to take it easy. And I'm going to live ghetto fabulous if you're from West Helena. But what did God say to him? What did God call him? God called that guy a fool. Like that is in red. God said, you are a fool. Because he stored up things on this earth instead of treasures in heaven. When you start to believe that you're the owner of anything, then your attitude is wrong. And when you get like that, you don't own anything. It owns you. You must surrender ownership of your life, of your stuff, of your checkbook over to God. A pastor was invited to have dinner at the home of a very wealthy man, and after dinner, the wealthy man, he took the pastor out on the property so that he could see the surrounding area. And he pointed one direction, and there was oil wells just lined up on this property. And the wealthy man told the pastor, he said, 25 years ago, I didn't have nothing. Now I've got all that you can see. As far as you can see, that's what I own. And he pointed another direction. And just fields of just grain and crops. And he says, I own all that too. As far as you can see, I own all of that. Then he pointed another direction. And there was more cattle than you could count. And he said, all that too. That's all mine. And he pointed another direction. It was just a forest. He said, I own all of that too. Everything that you can see, I own. And he paused as he waited on the pastor to compliment him. The pastor pointed to the sky. He said, how much you own in that direction? Listen, we all want stuff. I believe everybody in here would admit that. But how much have you invested in God? How much have you invested in your personal relationship with Jesus? How much have you invested into His kingdom and not yours? Are you investing in the most important treasure of all, which is Jesus? Or are you investing in your own treasures? Those things that one day will go away. True wealth, true treasures only come from God. Verse 20, one more time. It said, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. One night some thieves broke into a jewelry store, but they didn't steal anything. All they did was switch the price tags around. So the next day, they couldn't tell what was valuable and what was cheap. So the people that were buying the cheap stuff were actually leaving with priceless jewels. But the people that were buying the expensive stuff were leaving with all the fake stuff. But so here's my question to you. Because we place value on our stuff, do we not? Right? Amen. Come on, somebody. Amen. Who we place value on our stuff. But here's my question to you. What if those price tags got switched? Where's your value at? What are you placing value in your life? Like for real. What if that stuff got switched around? Like the stuff that this is high priority in my life, like what if it was worthless now? You see, in our little world that we live in, that would mess us up. Is your treasure found in God? Do we measure value on the basis of material wealth, power, popularity, and prestige? Because Jesus taught that those things are worthless. Because at the end of the day, what happens to your stuff? It all goes back in the box. So what happens when we finish the game of Monopoly? Somebody wins. The other 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, they went bankrupt. What happens with that stuff? We cheer for a little while, right? But what do we do with it? When the game's over, what happens? We pick it up. We put it up. Where does it go? Back in the box. So let me ask you something. I'm going to pick on you for a little bit. That's all right, right? Instead of having the $80,000 car, what's wrong with the $40,000 car? And why can't you take that other $40,000 and invest in something that's going to be here? Teenagers, you ain't off the hook. You think I'm going to pick on these grown folks? I ain't going to pick on y'all? Here's the deal, teenagers. Hey, listen to me. All you teenagers, listen to me. What's more important? Having the $150 pair of Jordans? Or sticking with the $80 pair of Nikes? You're pretty smart. Because here's the deal, teenagers. You know why I'm preaching this message today? Because of you. Because what we finna do, we finna ask these people in here to give to that over there. That's what we're fixing to do. We're finna ask all these people in here to give to something that you're going to benefit from. So take that into account the next time you're at Walmart or you're at the clothes store and you throwing a fit because your mom and daddy said no on something. Because what's going to happen is they got the message, but did you get the message? See what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, where does it go? It goes back in the box. Your stuff is not that important. We all want stuff. Man, I want stuff, you want stuff. I want nice cars, you want nice cars. But I am fixing to ask you to give above and beyond your regular tithe. Because not only will these kids benefit from that building over there that we're calling the Students Activity Center, but your grandkids, their kids. There ain't nobody built a new church building in Belleville in 100 years. And we're asking you to give. The last Sunday of every month, we're calling it an overflow offering. Because we're asking you to invest in His kingdom, not ours. I'm sacrificing just like you're going to sacrifice. I'm giving above and beyond today just like you're going to give above and beyond. And you say, hey man, Logan, I'm not prepared to do that today. Hey, that's fine. Next week, man, just designate that. Just write on the check or the envelope, the building, something, so that our financial people can see that. But at the end of the day, in all seriousness, we are so guilty of worshiping stuff that will not be here. You know, I told my parents, because my parents they're getting on up in age and their health is not real good. I hope they don't watch this and hear me say that. But I've told my dad repeatedly, because he's like a pack rat, man. He's got tools from his great-grandpappy, and I don't want that crap. I'm just going to be honest with you. But I've told my dad, like, if you two fall over dead, you better have all this crap worked out, because I ain't messing with it. Like, I don't want it. Because this is what it is. That stuff that you got to have right now, it's a burden to your kids, man. How many families have split up and never talk again over some doggone pictures of grandma? Like, is it really worth it to not talk to your brother or sister, your aunt and uncle, because somebody took an iron skillet? Like, for real. It ain't worth it, man. Your relationship with Jesus should come first, and your relationship with your family should be right there. Not stuff. Like, who cares? Because, like it said in Peter, man, when God's wrath sets down on this place, that crap is going to be gone anyway. Right? So, man, let me pray for you. Hey, we're going to sing, and after we sing, we're going to take up an offering. And I'm asking you, from deep within my heart, I'm asking on behalf of these kids, man, invest in that building over there. And I promise you, your money will not go somewhere it's not supposed to go. It is going strictly to that building to get that thing knocked out and get it paid for. So let me pray, and we're going to stand up and sing in just a minute. If you need me, and you're like, man, I don't know Jesus, I would love to introduce you to Jesus. But other than that, man, we're just going to sing together, and we're going to worship one more time before we take up an offering. All right?